Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ben Talks About. I'm of course your host, Ben Contreras, and I feel like it wouldn't be a episode on the Jasper Cat Productions channel without there being at least some sort of a tribute to the stuff that sort of got me into doing this whole YouTube channel in the first place, and that's of course talking about figures based on the King of the Monsters, Godzilla. And I feel like it is also sort of appropriate that I do it at this time after all that new Godzilla vs. Kong movie is going to be coming out in March, so I'm definitely excited for that. We also got an announcement of that new Netflix Godzilla series that's coming out eventually, so that's going to be pretty cool. But more specifically, we're going to be taking a look at one particular figure that I sort of saw just there on a shelf at Walmart this one time, and I just felt sort of compelled to get it. And it's actually this guy right over here, which is the NECA series, Godzilla 1994, from the movie Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. This is a part of I don't think it's a very new toy line, because it actually came out quite a few years ago, but I wasn't necessarily compelled to get any of these figures until now. They had these, and they also had the original 1954 version of the character. And what these basically are essentially the quote-unquote cheapest way to get a specific version of a particular Godzilla without spending big money for the original Bandai figures. So yeah, with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about the figure itself. Now, when compared to the actual film version of the character, it actually does look very, very, very accurate, especially when compared to other Godzilla films based on the Heisei series of films. This one in particular really does look nice, and it captures the more bulkier, chunkier appearance that he had in that version of the film. And like I said, the proportions of it look really good. As you can see, it wouldn't necessarily be a version of the Heisei Godzilla without his upper legs being extraordinarily really large, and also the fact that he's got a really, really tiny head compared to the rest of the body. And this version of Godzilla actually has a larger eyes compared to the other versions of his Heisei design, and there are other ones that have like an alternate sort of like neck pattern. The proportions are slightly different. There are a lot of subtle changes to the Heisei designs, while also still keeping like a sort of consistent look, so that you could tell that it's a version of Godzilla from that specific series. And like I said, I feel like this figure actually captures that really well and looks really, really nice. Now, one thing that this figure has over a lot of other, like the original Bandai figures and all that, is the amount of articulation that it has. And while the articulation is very prevalent in this figure, it's not exactly as posable as something like the Japanese SH Monster Arts figures. Those are like the ones that people really try to collect, but unfortunately those can be sold for a much higher price. So these are basically America's equivalent to those figures, where they give you a movie accurate, like fully posed, not necessarily fully posable, but more posable version of a Godzilla from a specific film that one is looking for. And the first area that I actually want to show off is actually the tail, because when this actually came in the box, the tail was actually a separate piece at least the very tip area of the tail was actually a separate piece, and it actually connected to this area here via a ball joint. And one thing about this part of the tail that is actually different from the rest of the tail is that this tail is actually a sort of like a rubberized sort of plastic, so that when you actually try to bend it, it actually stays in that sort of like pose, so that you're able to like display it in like a certain way. Like if you want it to like be like pointed up like that, it's not gonna, it's sort of drooping downwards, but that can easily be fixed. But if you want it to sort of look like that, or if you want it to like move to the side, you know, it's a very sort of posable kind of tail. And the other parts of the tail right here are on a separate joint as well, so that it's able to move very well on its own as well. So there's a lot of movement in the tail compared to like some of the other figures where it would just be one solid piece. And also this area right here is able to like, I'm pretty sure this area is also like a separate piece, but it's just permanently like connected to the rest of the body, so it's able to like fully turn around, although you're never going to really pose it with its tail facing like that. Yeah, after that, the legs are fully movable. They're able to move all the way around, and one thing that I really like about this figure is that its knees have like an actual joint to it, so it's actually able to bend. He's actually able to bend his knees, so you're able to get him into more different standing poses. Although, really, most of the time you would usually just pose him like how he normally would be, with his legs sort of bent over. Because if you end up trying to make his legs a lot more straight, then there's just something about that just doesn't seem right for a Godzilla to like sort of be in this more straightforward sort of pose. I don't know why. There's just something about it sort of, I guess, rubbed me the wrong way, I suppose. Other than that, the feet are also on a it's not as great of a joint, but it is able to move slightly up and down, and it's able to twist all full 360 around. So that's really nice. And also make sure to be careful with these areas here, because his toes and especially his fingers are all really pointy, so you want to make sure to be careful with that. The upper half of it, the waist, is able to sort of move around, but that's one thing that you sort of got to be careful, because the joint, especially when it came out of the box, was a bit stiff. But after moving it around for a while, it does start to loosen up a little bit more. So it's able to he's able to turn his waist more than he did when I first got him. As for the arms, these ones are sort of like a weird sort of joint to talk about, because there are parts of it that seem like they should be able to move, but then there are parts of it that seem that don't necessarily move. Like the shoulder is on its own joint, so it's able to move all the way around. The lower area of the shoulder that connects it to the arm is able to move around like this, and the elbows sort of, well, I guess they sort of do, but it's not able to make it so that his hands are like standing all the way down. Although, again, for this particular version, you're basically going to be posing him so that he's always got his arms moving forward, and it's the same sort of joint that's on the other hand as well. The hands are able to also move a full 360, and one thing that I actually do like about this is that the area that connects all of the index fingers are all on a separate piece from the rest of the hand, so you're able to make him like have his like fist sort of clenched, but as you can see, you can still tell that he's still got his arm like sort of going like this. And yeah, that's all the articulation for the arm joints. And then for the head, this is just sort of the part that I don't necessarily like about the figure, because the thing about this one is that this whole like neck area right here is a completely separate piece that from the rest of the head. It's not like this is an entirely separate piece altogether and this is connected to it. It's like this is a little area that's sort of like covering up the actual joint of it, and because of that, it sort of like limits the amount of like movement the head can do. The only real part that can move from the neck is the part that connects it to the actual part of his head, which can move all the way around. But like he's not going to be able to like turn his entire neck to look to the side, and it also prevents him from looking up really far or looking down super far. And when you sort of, I'm not quite sure how well you can see it, but this area right here, it almost looks like they made it like a slightly too bigger compared to the rest of the head. So it just makes it seem like the head is a lot smaller than it should be when comparing it to this piece right here. But it's not necessarily something that is overly distracting. The other thing that I really like about this figure compared to others is that this one actually has like an actual like opening mouth, and you can actually see some detail in his actual mouth area, if you can see that. So yeah, being able to like open and close his mouth is really cool. Unfortunately, this figure doesn't come with any like sort of like additional like accessories like beam effect parts or anything like that, which is something that would be kind of cool to get a more like I guess you could sort of say dynamic sort of pose for a Godzilla. Although there are some other figures in the in this NECA toy line that actually do come with additional accessories. And one thing that sort of confuses me is the design of the box. For one thing, there are two separate box designs. One of them is the more generic sort of box that I got for my figure, and then there's another series of the exact same toy line where they actually come in a much nicer box that actually has the artwork of the poster that um, of the movie that the figure that's that it actually belongs to, which is a whole lot nicer. But for these ones, they came in these more like generic sort of plastic boxes with with the artwork of the 1954 Godzilla, which correct me if I'm mistaken, isn't this the exact same artwork that they used for the the Bandai Creation Godzilla figures? Because that looks like one of the the actual 54 figure they had for their toy line. I'm not sure if that's just me or if they're just reusing the same box art because the creators of it didn't don't really care if they use the same sort of box design, but it feels like that's sort of going to confuse someone who doesn't know too much about these toy lines. And for the pose on the back of it, it would have been cool if they had like artwork that had a picture of all the different figures that is actually in this line, but instead they just have the regular pose of this particular Godzilla figure as the thing on the box. So I just feel like they sort of they were just sort of, I don't want to necessarily say lazy with the box design, but I feel like they could have done a bit more effort with it. But again, with the amount of detail that it has and the amount of articulation, you're able to get it into some pretty cool poses, especially when you have other figures from this toy line or other figures that are more proportionate to it, to sort of to have it be on display with. And speaking of which, I actually have two particular figures that I wanted to show off to sort of compare the size for it. So the first one right here is actually appropriate for the movie that has come, the Bandai version of Space Godzilla. And as you can no doubt see, the sizing for these two is, I'm pretty sure this is really inaccurate because it's been a while since I last saw the film, but I'm pretty sure Space Godzilla was at least the same height or at least a little bit bigger than Godzilla. But here they actually make it so that from here to the tallest point here, his head doesn't reach his head, so it makes it makes Space Godzilla seem a lot less intimidating. So as for another comparison, I also have this version of Burning Godzilla, that's the translucent version of the Bandai figure, which I believe is slightly, if not, okay, I'm wrong. It's actually ever so slightly shorter compared to this version, and as you can no doubt tell, since this is the last version of Godzilla, I believe he was a slightly larger, if not the same size as he was in this movie. But despite that, I still think that he looks good when displayed with the other Godzilla figures, and I'm actually really glad that I actually got this guy because, again, a lot of these type of figures, especially ones that are from specific films, like the different Heisei versions of Godzilla and the other more obscure kaiju that Bandai didn't make too many figures of, and if they did, they go for a much higher price compared to these. You can get these figures easily at places like Walmart or Target for around $25 to $30, and some of them come with actual accessories, and I feel like that's actually a pretty good deal, since a lot of these figures are ones that, again, Bandai didn't actually make figures of, so I'm hoping that if this series isn't going anytime soon, that they do end up making not only more versions of Godzilla, but also more versions of other kaiju that would be much harder to find actual figures of, especially nowadays since those figures are again so old. But yeah, I would most definitely recommend that you get this guy and get any of the other figures that are in this NECA toy line of Godzilla figures, and I'm most definitely going to start collecting more of them. Um, and once I do, I am most definitely going to be making other videos of them where I actually talk about those figures. So I hope you all enjoyed this little tribute that I made to the sort of origins of the Jasper Cat production channel. And for those of you who have been here since the very beginning watching my videos and staying subscribed despite my rather sporadic upload schedule, well, thank you for one thing, and I'm most definitely not going away anytime soon. After all, I still got a whole bunch of these guys to make, and I got some more stuff to do involving video games. But until I see you all next time, I am Ben Ferris, and bye.